I'd like to. I got to spend 30 seconds on the A Day Without a Woman march. I think they're underway in various parts of the country. Now, what do you make of this? You're wearing a T-shirt related to this issue. What do you make of this Day Without a Woman?
I love this whole idea of vacation as striking. I'm an empowered woman, so I'm going to work today, Stuart, because I have children who depend on me, and I have bills to pay, mouths to feed, so to speak. So I'm going to work. This whole idea, first off, I think it's interesting that you have a terrorist that planned this march in the first place. It's a super lefty entity that's doing this. And what for? What rights do women not have that men have? No, none of them have been able to answer that question. What rights do these feminists not have that men do?
What I'm trying to get at is why did you go from a liberal to a conservative?
Like, what about the liberalism made you say, this is not working for me being a mother?
I started recognizing that there were a number of platforms with which I did not agree, that liberals, that progressives hold, that I realized that I didn't hold anymore.
Like what?
Like, name a few. Well, big government is one of them. Fiscal responsibility. Like, I started realizing the importance of people should be good stewards to their fellow man. And really, big government is it's the problem of what happens when people just forget that they should be kind and they should help people and they should voluntarily do it.
That 9/11 was what changed you.
Yeah, because the last thing about me that was that I held on to that was pretty progressive was I was against all military intervention, no matter what. I was not, I was against Iraq, I was against absolutely everything, and then 9/11 happened, and I had always thought that, well, no one's going to come over to the United States and ever do anything to us here. Why do we need all this in defense? Why do we need all this military spending? Like this is ever going to happen. We're just, we're just being weird about it, and then 9/11 happened.
And is it?
The thing with Brazil, I mean, I'll tell you this, as a debate moderator myself, I cannot imagine anyone at CNN ever leaking a question to anyone. I mean, it would be the height of unethical. I can't imagine it. And yet the question, as asked, and what was in that email, Dana, was almost verbatim.
It's a remarkable coincidence, isn't it, Megan? The thing is I'm with you. I mean, I can't imagine someone leaking it, but at the same time, it's Occam's razor. You can't sit here and deny the obvious. The question was almost identical to the one that was asked at the town hall, and it's not beyond the realm of possibility to think that perhaps maybe Donna Brazile was able to obtain this question in advance, and then, of course, I mean, she's the head of the party. She's going to pass that off to the party's nominee, Hillary Clinton.
But she was a Democrat. She wasn't the head of the party then, but she was a Democrat.
No,
but,
not Richard, then, but she did become it.
Just for kicks, I Googled the language, and it does pull up the Equal Justice Initiative, which has almost exactly the same language, saying, since 1973, 156 people have been released from death row after evidence of their innocence was uncovered. So this may be boilerplate language that, death penalty opponents have on their websites. We don't have proof to show collusion.
We don't, Megan, and let me tell you, let me be very frank on this one. I know Donna Brazile very, very, very well, and there's no strict estimation that Donna would ever do anything like this, which is the reason why the party chose her to be the interim chair after the leak with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So I dismiss this on face just based on the reputation that Donna Brazile has to both me and many people watching tonight. But additionally, and to a larger perspective, right? So there's this argument constantly pushed by the Trump campaign that we saw on the bump into this segment of the media being so crooked and being so awful and being so tainted. But if you look at the numbers, Megan, Donald Trump has got more earned media than any candidate in recent history.
But he wants it to be favorable. He wants it to be favorable coverage.
But here's the thing. Any press is good press, is what you learn in journalism school, right? And number two, and I think the most important point is if the liberal media had so much power, why is it that Republicans still have control of the Congress, they still have control of the Senate? If the media, quote unquote, hated George Bush, but he won in 2000, he won in 2004.
Go ahead, Dana. Respond to that.
Yeah, well, of course, we don't have the White House, unfortunately, and I think we've been fighting in spite of media bias.
That's your fault, Dana, not ours.
No,
Let her
it's
respond.
not actually
Go ahead,
a
Dana.
fact. Come on, Richard. No, there's absolute media bias in network media. You know that as well as I do. There's also left outlets and right outlets that are both equally biased. But here's the thing. We've had network news and we've had major publishers of newspapers, etc., that have been biased for a long time. There is absolute proof of media bias. We know this. And it's not just against Trump, Megyn. Media has been biased against Republicans, period, for such a long time. The whole vast right-wing conspiracy, everything that we've seen from the WikiLeaks emails or the document dumps so far. I mean, we know that there's a bias here. I mean, for crying out loud, we had George Stephanopoulos back in 2012 during the debates insert that answer about birth control, which then flipped the entire general election cycle to become this whole war on women narrative,
Well,
which was crazy.
There's no question that there's no
race. I don't think the Tea Party movement itself is racist. I think the Tea Party has been a home for racism and for people that believe in racist ideology and racist policies
now
like
give me the
neo-Nazis.
specifics. I'm waiting for the specifics. Dana's waiting patiently for the specifics.
A couple years ago when they passed the Health Care Reform Act, CBC members, this was reported by the AP, CBC members were walking out, or Congressional Black Caucus were walking out of the Capitol. They were called the N-word, they were spit upon, they were jeered.
Andrew Breitbart offered $100,000 for any evidence to back that claim up, and it didn't exist.
The AP reported it. There was an AP reporter there that reported it, Sean.
The mainstream media, Dana, can get it wrong?
Yeah, well, Richard's omitting the fact that Emanuel Cleaver, who, by the way, is a lawmaker from my home state of Missouri, actually backpedaled on some of that, which was reported, as he's quoting, by the Associated Press. Not to mention, there were a sea of webcams there. There were a sea of iPhone cameras and handheld cameras, and not a single one of those cameras, in an era where we have such digital technology and we're able to capture absolutely everything, not a single one of those cameras, Sean, as you know, captured anything that any of these CBC members were alleging. And then, of course, you had Cleaver backpedaling as well. So let's report the full scope of the story and not just rely on some, oh, well, the AP said. Well, the AP also said this, too.
But Richard, you just said that it was racial in some regard. The Tea Party's racial. I wouldn't be a part of a group that was racial. Dana wouldn't be a part of a group that's racial. So tell me, give me examples and help me out here.
That's not what I said, Sean. I said the Tea Party as a movement is not racist. I'm not saying the Tea Party is racist. What I'm saying is the Tea Party has become a bastion for racism and racist individuals.
A bastion means there's a lot of examples.
But you're saying the same thing. It's semantics. You're saying the same thing.
It's not semantics at all. It is not semantics at all. There are people who are noted neo-Nazis, people who are noted. Who are, for example, Stormfront.com, who they profess to be part of the Tea Party, they're anti-Semitic, they're homophobic, they're racist,
give me an example.
And I can go on and on about how they do not like African Americans.
We're going around in a circle, Richard. I think this is. Give us examples. Yeah, we're on the same
I just gave you an example. Stormfront.com.
I've never heard of
an organization.
Who are they?
It's an organization that professes to be part of the Tea Party, and they actually do not like African Americans.
The Black Panthers profess to be part of the progressive movement. So do you?
Wait a second. Now let's be very clear.
Oh, wait a minute. No. Let's be clear. It's the same thing. So I'm not even familiar with the group that you mentioned, but you're saying that the Tea Party is racist. Richard, you're saying that the Tea Party is racist.
Dana,
We've asked for a number of examples.
Let me be very clear. The stereotype that exists.
Guys, one at a time.
Just come out with it.
Dana, you finished, then Richard. Go ahead.
Richard, all we're asking for is an example. You keep saying, well, such and such group. Okay, well, show me where Tea Partiers have behaved in a racist fashion.
I just pointed to their website, but that's beyond the point.
I need an example.
The stereotype,
I don't know who this group is.
The stereotype that exists in the United States is the Tea Party is a racist organization. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's false. I'm saying that is the stereotype. And in order to dispel the stereotype, what has to happen is individuals like yourself and Sean, who are upright, standing, card-carrying Tea Party members, have to go out and say, we reject all instances of racism that happen at Tea Party events.
We've already said that.
When people compare the president, when people tell the president to go back home to Kenya, when people are looking for the president's birth certificate, or people are waving the Confederate flag in front of the White House, that is what you would call racism.
That came from your...
Smith & Wesson, the #1 gun seller in the country, their shares have gone up a whopping 952%. Ruger up 911%. Apple only 773%. I think you can thank Obama for that and the threat that people feel.
You absolutely can. Sean, do you remember when he and Josh Earnest were telling everyone, all right, now Thanksgiving, you go home, you talk to your family members about gun control, and then what, the Friday right after, everybody went out and bought firearms. 2015 is being called the year of the gun. He is the best firearm salesman ever. And the AP, I can't even believe I'm saying this, the AP is actually correct. There's nothing that he would have proposed that would have made it better. But you know what, Sean? He always talks about how he wants to help the people who have been affected by gun violence. But all this president has done is enable the repeat offenders and the gangbangers and everyone else, those people who drive the gun homicide rate.
You know what? You two are so far gone on this issue. I can't get it. You know, the president has done zero. He has not denied anybody the opportunity to go buy a gun in this country.
Making it harder.
No. And we live in a period where 100,000 people in the last 10 years killed by guns, millions assaulted, hundreds of thousands of suicides,
I see your list.
500,000 injured. And you guys say, oh, don't do anything. Leave it alone.
No, Juan, that's not what anyone is saying at all.
President Crybaby. Let's go back. I thought these were crocodile tears. The president out there crying. Do you realize the day that James Foley was beheaded? Do you remember that day?
Yes.
And he went out there and he gave a 30, 40-second, comment, and then he raced off. He didn't want to be late for his tea time. Right. You know, I'm sorry, I'm not buying it.
So you want to weigh injustice and tragedy, but let me just tell you something.
Yeah.
When you see little children slaughtered, maybe it touches your heart,
Hey,
Sean.
Juan, it touches my heart so much that I think every school district in the country needs retired policemen and military professionals.
What about the defensive gun uses? Do you realize that the CDC and the National Research Institute came out with a study showing that by large defensive gun use outweighs criminal use? You're looking at anywhere from 500,000 to 3.3 million instances of defensive gun use a year. Why do we not have a press conference where the president is surrounded by the people who successfully defended themselves using a firearm?
Hey,
My
Dana,
life was protected by one. The people at Clackamas Mall, Juan, their lives were protected
because your side of this argument, the NRA and their acolytes, all say we don't want gun research done by any reputable group that could be
by a government
objective.
agency controlled by the president that can manipulate it to do whatever he wants?
You don't want to know
we
what's
have
really
independent
going on,
firearm
Dana,
research.
it
We
might
also
not
have
support your
uniform
point
crime
of view.
reports from the FBI. You just don't like the truth, Juan.
Or perhaps he just bought him one that was legal. But my point is we don't have the evidence that this was an unlawful gun yet. And we didn't have that evidence in the case of Sandy Hook either.
Well, you know, there's an interesting study recently done. In Australia in 1996, there was a mass shooting epidemic. There were 11 mass shootings that happened in a decade, which was the highest ever. Under a conservative prime minister, they passed sweeping gun reform laws, destroyed 650,000 semi-automatic and automatic weapons, created tight restrictions in Australia, and within 10 years, the murders created by gun violence dropped by 59%. They went from 11 murders in a decade, mass murders in a decade, to 0. So there are, there's evidence here to show that this type of reform does have a serious impact. Now, can you control the black market?
And yet, Dana, that's not the experience we had in our country when Bill Clinton, passed his gun law.
Right. No, and there's something I want to point out, Megan. I mean, I could sit here, I did write the book on it, and I could sit here and spat off stats all day long. For instance, Honduras has 21 times the gun murders that we do and 14 times fewer guns. But this gun, we do know, actually, that this individual, this murderous thug in Charleston, was legally barred from carrying, Megan. We could talk about statistics, but it's irrelevant here. In South Carolina, all you have to do is be charged with a felony to be declared illegitimate to carry, which he was in February of 2015. You're charged with the felony. He was for drug possession. It was methamphetamine and cocaine. His father purchased a firearm for him for his 21st birthday, April 4th, 2015. That could have been a straw man purchase, which is also a felony. He reportedly told someone that he stole the gun that he used in these murders. That's also a felony. Felony, felony, felony. We have regulations on firearm ownership, which is why when you compare us to countries, advanced countries, Megan, that have fewer guns and more restrictions, the murder rate is higher. The violent crime rate is higher. The studies speak for themselves. What about
are you going to let me talk? You've had
Let's
a wonderful
not be flat
time
earthers
talking.
about gun laws, guys, and statistics.
Hey, listen, I'm with you. I'm for stats and statistics. Here's what's actually true. This is not a debate about concealed carry. You want to move the argument over to something that nobody's arguing about. Nobody's arguing about concealed carry. People are arguing about military-style weapons on the streets of America and whether or not that is a good thing or a bad thing.
That's a false premise. That's a false premise.
No, that's not. it's a false premise.
Van, do you actually know what the difference? I'm going to correct you because
right
I'm tired of this talking point being put out there. First and foremost, let's get something straight. Military-style assault weapons are not out on the street. We are talking about semi-automatic weapons, weapons that are capable of select fire, or weapons that are fully automatic. Then you can use. No, I'm not going to let this go anymore, Piers.
No, Dana, you said this repeatedly on my show.
Let's stop conflating. Let's stop playing about ignorance and let's stop conflating.
General Stanley McChrystal used the phrase. So forget us, forget Van, forget me. One of the great military commanders of the last 20 years in America said these were military-style weapons. So is he wrong? Do you know more about these weapons than General McChrystal does?
General McChrystal is also of your same ideology, so I want to put that out there first and foremost. There is a deliberate effort to conflate the types of firearms. I do not own a military-style assault weapon. Just because of what a firearm looks scary, then you call it military assault. Do you realize that one of my children has a BB gun that looks like an AR-15? Is that going to be considered a military-style assault weapon? It sounds silly and uneducated.
Adam Lanza killed. Wait a minute. Adam Lanza killed.
It's dangerous.
Adam Lanza, as we now know, in the space of 300 seconds, using an AR-15, killed 26 people, Dana. He had magazines. He had magazines with 30 bullets. Are you telling me?
And he reloaded 4 times. Anyone can reload.
Are you telling me that
anyone can reload?
Dana, let me finish. Are you telling me that doesn't qualify as an assault weapon?
By the technical definition, no, Piers. Anything can be qualified as an assault weapon. If you stab someone with a spoon, it can be qualified as an assault weapon.
So you're equating stabbing somebody with a spoon to shooting dead 26 people.
If this is a conversation about a ban on magazine capacity,
really? You're talking about stabbing somebody with a spoon?
Piers, you can take a speed loader and reload a revolver. 150 rounds, that means he had to reload 4 times. And the only reason that he stopped was because he heard authorities.
No,
Van, this is the strategy of the people who actually deliberately want to disarm individuals. You guys talk about magazine, you talk about magazine restrictions.
Okay, let Van have his say.
See, this is a conscious strategy on the part of the pro-gun folks to constantly bring things back around to things that don't make any sense. You're talking about people stabbing people with spoons. If that were the problem we had in America, people stabbing people with spoons, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. What we're talking about is funeral after funeral after funeral. What we're talking about is our children being gunned down, and what we're talking about is common sense measures, not confiscating guns. We're not talking about that. We're talking about common sense measures that 90% of Americans agree with and that the majority of gun owners agree with. But when you guys get on television, you don't talk like the people who actually are the gun owners in America. What you talk like are people who want to take the conversation in a direction that has nothing to do.
And by the way, CBS, the latest CBS poll shows that support for these gun control measures is tanking. This is about disarmament. Let me ask you. Yes, no, let me finish my thought because I have a very logical thought that I want to let you answer. I'm tired of this conflation and this uneducation when it comes to using terms about firearms. Let's use accurate terms so that people know what we're talking about. If this is about limiting the number of children dying, let's talk about magazine capacity. Why, if 30-round magazine capacity isn't okay, then what's the difference between 30 rounds and what's the difference between 7 rounds? Piers Morgan, let me ask you a question. How many deaths are okay to you? How many deaths are okay to you? Answer that question.
Let me ask you a question. The difference between 30 and 7 is 23. So it could save 23 lives if there was a federal ban on any of these magazines.
7 lives lost are okay with you then?
And you actually, no, you know what, Dana?
This is ridiculous. Okay, I understand that. 7 lives lost are okay.
7 is better than 30.
7 lives lost to you are all right.
30 are okay with you.
Dana, is better than losing 30. Yes, it is.
I'm just trying to establish where you draw the line. Where do you draw the line at preventing the deaths of children, Piers? I mean,
I would love to draw the line.
Any loss of life is horrible. But
I would love to draw the line, Dana, at 0 gun deaths in America every year.
So you do believe in disarmament, then?
I said
0 gun deaths. So you do believe in disarmament?
0 gun deaths.
That's the answer that I wanted.
When did I say disarmament? No, wait a minute. You talk about conflating the argument.
Piers,
Dana, when did I say disarmament?
I'm taking it down. I'm using your logic and going down that road. If you're talking about limiting magazines, first and foremost, any magazines are universal. I can make one in my garage.
I said I wanted 0. I said I wanted 0 gun deaths.
Let's take that and throw that out.